Hello, my name is Paul Neelzes and I'm going to present the work Automatic Identification of Wireless Sensor Network Topology and Discovery of User Routines that was developed at the Institute of Systems and Robotics of the University of Coimbra. Currently, the number of devices available for home automation is quite large. The number of brands tends to increase every day as well. But the adoption of these devices is not, let's say, has not seen a sustained increase as it would be expected. And the reasons may be related with the complicated setup procedures that do not take into account the common user, let's say, and on the other side, the users do not want to be stuck with a large, non-necessarily expendable investments, as most of these devices are, let's say, compatible only with the proprietary ecosystems and that do not frequently do not support integration of other devices from another companies. Another aspect is the related with this is the fact that each brand has its own ecosystem, as I already mentioned, and the available technology is not necessarily plug and play, not designed to be incrementally installed. So that means that if I go to a store and I see a new device that eventually attracts me, I'm not sure that taking it home, that device, I will easily integrate it on the system that I already have. The other fact is that frequently, or in most cases, the integration of these devices and let's say the setup of a good automation level requires people with sufficient knowledge, or to hire an expert for doing that. And that means that this is expensive. In most cases, the devices are expensive, and having to have a technician to install them makes it even more expensive. So setting up an home sensor network normally requires to deploy the sensors along the house spaces, connect them to some concentrator or gateway system, identify sensor space relationship, and then establish rules for normal functioning or eventually abnormal event detection for triggering alarms. To this end, the objective of this work, or the objectives of this work, is to propose a method for establishing a sensor network topology extracted from simple temporal correlation of event detection. Also to avoid the complexity and large data requirements of typical data mining approaches, and to propose a simple solution that can be integrated in home automated system, enabling customers to take advantage of these systems for either house security or elder people safety. This is more and more important as in an aging society, aged people tend to live alone or stay for long periods of the day alone at home. And one of the concerns is the fact that the frailty associated with aging frequently leads to accidents, being the most common one, the falls, where people frequently cannot get up by themselves and cannot call somebody to come to help them. And there are frequently we receive reports about people that were found dead after laying down for many hours or days. So the idea behind this work is to have a system that with two functioning modes, learning mode, where it acquires information about the environment or the setup, and uses the flow of people around the house to establish the neighboring relationships, and also learn natural routines of the inhabitants of the house. In the normal functioning mode, one of the things that we would like to explore is to detect abnormal situations and then trigger alarms for the situations that are already mentioned. Without going into many details, so the thing is to establish the temporal relationship between events. For instance, in this case, we are mostly concerned with motion sensors, but this can be related with other type of devices. For instance, switches to detect when a switch was switched on and then a person moved to another place, and then it was detected by some other presence sensor or whatever. The main idea among these is to try to establish the temporal relationship between these events. For instance, in this case that I am showing, we can see that there are events that are somewhat isolated. For instance, on day 1, event 1, 5, 6, and 7. And on day 1, we have event 2, 3, and 4 that occur within a temporal threshold. That means that the event 3 happens a few seconds after event 2, event 4 a few seconds after event 3, but both of them within the maximum established threshold for sequences. On day 2, for instance, we can find a longer sequence where 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all these events belong to the same sequence, and the 7, 8 to another sequence. And the idea is exactly to try to establish these sequences and to get information about them. So we have, for this purpose, an experimental setup. Let's say a space that we have equipped with several set of sensors. So we have prepared in our lab a space representing a living room. Let's say a living room with a dining room table, and also a coffee machine, and so on. So this can be used to simulate a space where people live. We have, not related with this work, we also have some robots for helping people in the daily activities, or for interacting and promoting assistance, or just for promoting physical exercise, for instance. But these are not within the context of this work. So this experimental setup includes a set of motion sensors. In this case, we have used 7 Zigbee motion sensors, lights, switches, and also light sensors for detect light, temperature, and humidity, and so on. And this was all connected with the CONB the CONB2 let's say interface with the CONZ software, and then all this data is processed via Node-RED Dataflow and registered on the NoSQL database. In this case, it is MongoDB. So we have installed a set of sensors in our lab, in some spaces of in our lab. For instance, in zone A is the entrance of the institute, let's say, the entrance hall, and then there's a set of corridors that to connect to one experimental room, where zone C corresponds to the previous image that I've shown of the small apartment example, and other spaces, zone D, B, and E. So all these zones are, we have placed sensors, also the lights and so on, but we are more focused on the sensors on this case. And the architecture, let's say the communication between the elements is done via this kind of architecture. So motion sensor, for instance, communicates with the con B, and which in turn communicates with node red, that processes and establishes the relationship and stores the important data on the NoSQL database, and also provides a user interface to analyze the acquired data and so on. Okay, so as the results we have, this is the first results that we have acquired. That's the arrows show the detection, let's say the flow of events detected. So in this case, we have detected people coming from the entrance to the lab, to the first room, let's say, or coming from the entrance to other places, to room B or room E or space D, for instance. Okay, so we have found there's one of the things that we can we could get is the let's say to analyze the more frequent events that happen here, and we have, for instance, some of these trajectories are more frequent than the other. Okay. In terms of so we have this geometrical representation, but let's say we have placed the sensors and we do not really know, we don't have this graphical representation. One of the things that we can get from this data analysis is exactly the neighboring relationship. For instance, knowing that sensor 5 is connected, or there's a connection route between sensor 5 and sensor 6, or sensor 5 and sensor 2, and there's no connection or almost no connection with sensor 4. And there's, for instance, there's no connection between sensor 5 and sensor 0. So these arcs represent the transitions, the detected transitions. So, and we can also see that there are transitions that are more frequent than the others from the data acquired. So this was just acquired by the algorithm, simple algorithm that analyzes the most frequent transitions between nodes. As we can see here, there's from this algorithm we can, eventually, as we will not have the system learning during all the time, there may be some concentration on the trajectories on specific spaces. So the other alternative is to put the system in explicit learning mode and have a single person doing all the trajectories, all the possible trajectories that connect these devices by himself or herself, and then with that way that person travels all the possible paths that connect all the sensors. This is an explicit, let's say, an explicit mode of going. But this requires, on the other side, this requires the person to pay attention and to be sure to go from one place to the other place, go back to the first place and go to a third place, eventually go back to the first place and go to the fourth place if there's some three connections from the first place to other one. Okay, so there's so once we have established the connection between the sensors, let's say now we can say that we are ready to analyze and to acquire the most common routines. And by routines, we mean that people tend to do a specific movement between one place to another place, or generate a sequence of events at a specific period of the day. So, for instance, on our case, what we have done was exactly what we acquired is exactly this kind of relationship. So there's the quite, let's say, the transitions between sensors, the most frequent ones. For instance, in this case, we can see that sensor 2 is very frequently activated at a given time of the day, and sensor 3 also, and sensor 6, and there are less common transitions between some of the sensors. And this is normal. So when people go to a specific place, eventually people will stay there for a period, and it will happen that one event occurs in a given sensor, and then another one, and then another one, and then another one, and the same sensor. That means that the person has not moved from that place to another place. Okay. So, but it is possible to acquire sequences like this. So, for instance, at a given time of the day, at the evening, going from the TV room to the bathroom to the bedroom, and that's it. That means that the person has gone to bed. And during at night, the person is in the bedroom and goes to the bathroom and comes back to the bedroom. It's okay. Or going to the it is in the bathroom and going to the kitchen and back to the bathroom. This is the situations that, let's say, we can learn from this observation and say, okay, this is the most common thing that I've learned during a week, for instance, is this kind of event. And but eventually a person wakes up hungry and goes to the kitchen to have a snack or something and comes back to the bathroom or for a glass of water. The other interesting situation with this is that now we can detect abnormal situations. For instance, in the middle of the night, opening the front door is not common at all. So the hall sensor is activated, and eventually other sensors. But this is not common, and eventually we can establish rules for that. But we can also learn that it is not common for a person to open the front door at late night. Or, for instance, when a person goes from the bedroom to the hall and opening the outside door. This is not common and eventually not desirable. Or going from the bedroom to the bathroom and without returning to the bedroom. Or going from the bedroom to the kitchen and not returning, and similar from bedroom to TV room or something. And eventually we may detect that the person is on on one of these divisions, for instance, on the TV room, and does not go to the bathroom as usual. This event does not happen. So we have, for instance, analyzed what was more frequent, and for instance, in our lab, we have found that one of the most, let's say, the most common thing detected, which is normal, is to detect the entrance and morning arrival. So activating sensor 6 and then sensor 5 around 9, a quarter past 9, and many people arriving around this time. Okay, or after at lunchtime, people going out. So people have this tendency of having to leaving the lab for lunch at 12:05, and then returning to after lunch and also leaving at the end of the day. So with this network of sensors, we can detect spatial relationships, which is interesting, and we do not really need to have people's signatures. So it is true, if we can have the signature of one person, this is person A that comes from space 1 to space B to space C, this is interesting. But even with, let's say, more dumb sensors, if we can call it that, if you can call them like that, we can still have interesting information being produced in terms of habits. So using that information, we can establish the sensor topology, learn people's routines, and using this, we can detect abnormal situations. We can be quite useful for the safety of elderly people that live alone or stay alone at home for long periods. In terms of future directions, so one of the things that we are going to try is, for instance, which is related with one of the limitations of the current methods, is that these methods do not behave well when there are lots of events happening simultaneously in different spaces. We can filter out the non-adequate data based on entropy measures. So when there's a lot of events happening simultaneously, distributed by the place, the house, or whatever, we can just reject those events. And when the entropy is low, that means that the information is high, we can use those events to acquire the intended information. And basically, thank you for your attention.